Hi guys, so Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, and of course Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, clashed in Parliament on Wednesday. Now this has to have been the best Prime Minister's questions all year, and certainly since Keir Starmer became leader of the opposition. Now the back and forth between the two was a little bit slow at the beginning, but it gained some momentum later on, and it finished in an amazing way. So let's jump right in.
Mr. Speaker, I said 2 weeks ago at this dispatch box that I was very concerned that Tier 2 would not be strong enough to hold the virus. The Prime Minister said, don't worry about that, just support us, throw away the problems. 2 weeks later, what have we got? The virus rising in Tier 2 and Tier 3, and I'll come back to that. But if the Prime Minister thinks that the highest death numbers and the deepest recession is somehow delivering for the British people, he's a long way removed from the truth. The problem is the Prime Minister makes the same mistakes over and over again. And 2 weeks ago, he unveiled that latest COVID plan. He told the House, as he's done so many times before, that his plan would suppress the virus. But the latest figures show the opposite, and the Prime Minister said spikes here and there. Let me tell the House, in 3 out of 4 Tier 2 areas, infections are going up. In over half of the Tier 3 areas, infections are going up. Exactly the concern I put to the Prime Minister 2 weeks ago when he said, just back us anyway. As a result, this morning, 10 million people moved into tougher restrictions, exactly what we said would happen, going up the tiers. Does the Prime Minister not recognise that his latest plan has once again failed to control the virus, protect the NHS and our economy?
So the important themes to take from this is, once again, Boris Johnson is making mistakes. He's painting the picture of Boris Johnson as being incompetent. He hasn't attacked the NHS. He has never done that. He's focusing on the government here. He's focusing on Boris Johnson. And he laid out the facts. Over half, 3/4 almost, of Tier 2 infections are increasing. And over half of Tier 3 infections are increasing. Now, how can Boris Johnson account for that?
Mr. Speaker, once again he criticises the government's plans without producing any kind of plan of his own.
But he's not the Prime Minister. That's not his job. Now, of course, Boris Johnson knows that. Keir Starmer knows that. Parliament knows that. The job of the leader of the opposition is to hold the government to account. Is not to provide to provide advice to the government. The government have their advisors, and we'll get to one particular one later on. But he tries to, this is playing to the theatre, playing to the camera. It's this attempt to show, I'm trying to do my best. Why can't he provide some ideas? That's not how it works. But the casual observer may not know that.
Actually, if you look at what is happening, he was the mastermind author of I seem to remember, of the Labour firebreak in Wales, Mr. Speaker. But if you look at what is happening across the country, it is thanks to the efforts of the British people that we are seeing significant reductions in the virus in some of the areas where it was really surging. And that.
What areas, Boris? Once again, he doesn't provide any evidence. He just says, yes, it's down in certain areas that we're seeing a spike. What areas? List them out. It would actually help your position if you said, look, this city was in Tier 3, now it's in Tier 2. This area was seeing a spike, now it has been dealt with. He could actually, if he provided some evidence, he provided some examples that people could look at, but he's not. It's all bluster.
That is because of the hard work of the people of this country, and we will, of course, be continuing to reflect that as we go forward with the tiering approach. And we will continue to roll out the vaccine and roll out community testing, Mr. Speaker. And I may say, I think that his time would be better employed.
Now, see, this is where Boris Johnson goes into his typical Boris Johnson mode in Parliament. First, what he does is he ignores the question. He ignored the question. Then he moved on to attacking Keir Starmer. Why aren't you supporting the government? Why are you attacking us all the time? Turning it around as an attack, and then asking for Keir Starmer to unite with the government. I've covered this before. I've talked about this before on numerous occasions in during Prime Minister's questions. What Boris Johnson does is he first ignores the question or the comment, then he attacks the person asking the question, and then he finally goes to, why can't we all be united? Why can't we work together?
Supporting those wonderful initiatives, supporting community testing, encouraging people to get a test, encouraging people to get a vaccine, rather than continually attacking what the NHS and what the government is trying to do.
You see what Boris Johnson is doing? He's linking the government with the NHS. Keir Starmer has never attacked the NHS. Not on one occasion. You will find no occasions that Keir Starmer has attacked the NHS. He has attacked the government. But because Boris Johnson can't defend himself, he's trying to hide behind the NHS, saying, oh, you're attacking the NHS and the government. No, he's not. He's attacking the government. That's his job.
Starmer. Everybody to have the vaccine every time I've stood up and talked about it. But the Prime Minister's just avoiding the issue. In some places, Prime Minister, in the last 7 days, infection rate has gone up 70%. Everybody knows this is a problem. The Prime Minister is yet again pretending it isn't. Another major mistake of the last 12 months. Losing public trust.
Now, this is where Keir Starmer begins to shine. When I first heard this, I was cheering, literally cheering. So let me just get to the point that he raised first. So there's a 70% increase in the infections. So Boris Johnson said we need to go out of a lockdown into a tiered system because we're making progress. But if the infection rate is going up 70%, you're not making progress. Now, the point he's moving on to now, of course, is public trust. And I raised this in the past. We know who he's talking about here. He's going to get to it. Let me allow him to do it.
We all know what the tipping point was. The 520-mile round trip to Barnard Castle and the humiliating way in which the Prime Minister and his cabinet chose to defend it. And now we learn that while the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are telling the armed forces, police officers, care workers and firefighters that they will get a pay freeze, Dominic Cummings has been handed at least a £40,000 pay rise. How on earth does the Prime Minister justify that?
Amazing, fantastic. I love this, truly. Finally, Keir Starmer has taken the gloves off. He's really gone at Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson. He knows that Dominic Cummings is a hated figure in the country. He knows that Dominic Cummings has undermined public health. Why should ordinary people follow the rules if Dominic Cummings doesn't follow the rules? Dominic Cummings doesn't get punished. Dominic Cummings isn't fired. And Dominic Cummings doesn't even resign. So why should ordinary people follow the rules when Dominic Cummings is free to do whatever the hell he wants? Now, it's very important to remember that what Keir Starmer said here is public trust has been undermined by a public official, Dominic Cummings, and he called him out by name. And he also linked this to the fact that the armed forces, care workers, police, firefighters are facing a pay freeze, while at the same time Dominic Cummings is being handed a £40,000 pay increase. How do you justify that? Now, of course, Boris Johnson can't justify that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he totally...
Let me issue a spoiler. He's going to ignore the point.
Trivialises the efforts of the British people in getting the virus down. He says, he says that.
See, this is typical Boris bluster. He's confused now. He doesn't know what to say. He's been. I don't know whether he actually knew this point was coming. But if Boris was quick on his feet, he would say, "Look, Dominic Cummings is not part of this discussion. What Dominic Cummings is doing is unrelated to the pandemic. If Dominic Cummings received a pay increase, that's irrelevant to the discussion we're having now." That would be a bit more clever, in my opinion. But Boris isn't clever. He's been, he's like a boxer who's been punched a few times in the head, and he's confused. He doesn't know what the hell is going on.
None of the measures, none of the lockdown measures have worked. It's absolutely untrue, Mr. Speaker. From November,
he's talking about something irrelevant. But it doesn't matter, Boris. whatever you're saying, people are not listening. People are listening, and it's marinating in their minds the idea that essential workers like the armed forces, police officers, care workers, firefighters, they are facing a pay freeze while Dominic Cummings was handed a £40,000 pay increase. So that's sticking in people's minds. Whatever Boris Johnson is saying now is not registering with them.
December the 5th to December the 3rd, the people of this country came together once again to get the virus under control, and they may have made a huge amount of progress. We will continue with that tiering system, and
So he's just repeating the lines he had before. He doesn't know what to say. Okay, just go back to the comment that I made before. Yeah, we're going to maintain the system. We're going to work it out. We're going to have a vaccine. He's not actually saying anything. He's not adding anything to the conversation.
We will get that virus down, and that is the best way forward for this country. All he wants to do, Mr. Speaker, is to lock the whole country down. That's
what you were doing a few weeks ago. Boris Johnson imposed a lockdown. He was told you need to impose a lockdown. He ignored it, and then he eventually imposed a lockdown. And now he's attacking Keir Starmer for suggesting a lockdown. But Keir Starmer hasn't suggested a lockdown. Even though the medical advice, the specialists, the experts are saying you need to impose a lockdown, and you probably will in January. But he's confused. He's going back to, okay, let me look at my notes. What can I respond with?
One club golfer. That's the only solution he has. And then, Mr. Speaker, all he does is attack the economic consequences of lockdowns.
I don't know if you could hear, but there wasn't a lot of cheering for Boris Johnson there. His backbenchers were not cheering him on because they know that Dominic Cummings is extremely damaging to them. Dominic Cummings, as soon as Dominic Cummings is mentioned, the public are not happy. And it's very difficult for ordinary MPs in the Conservative Party to defend Dominic Cummings. Because on the one hand, they're telling people, look, you need to follow the rules. We need to keep this virus under control. And then in the next breath, they are saying, well, look, do I have to answer questions about Dominic Cummings?
Mr. Speaker, you could script that from October and November, when he was saying a lockdown's the last thing the country needs disastrous. 2 weeks later, he put it on the table and voted for it.
Fantastic. It's demonstrating that Boris Johnson doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's just, he has his set of notes and just repeats the same notes all the time.
Ridiculous. It's exactly the problem what we've got. Not learning from mistakes. And obviously we know about Dominic Cummings. It wasn't performance-related pay, Mr. Speaker. But I think the British people will find it pretty hard to understand why it's one rule for our key workers and another for his advisors.
Fantastic. Once again, he's hitting every nail right on the head here. One rule for the public, one rule for Dominic Cummings and his advisors and Boris Johnson's advisors. One rule for the government, one rule for everyone else. Now, I've been looking at some response videos to this. Also on the right, people who would normally support Brexit and support the Conservative Party. And a lot of them are not very happy with Boris Johnson when it came to this particular Prime Minister's questions. And many people are quite supportive, strangely, are quite supportive of Keir Starmer here.
And it's now likely that the next big mistake will be over the easing of restrictions over Christmas. And this isn't smarmy lawyers. Let me give you the British Medical Journal. The British Medical Journal yesterday said this: we believe the government is about to blunder into another major error that will cost many lives. The Prime Minister should listen to that advice, not just ignore it as usual.
Now, this is very important as well, that Keir Starmer is not saying, you should follow my advice, you should follow the medical advice. Boris Johnson's response has always been, Keir Starmer wants to close down the country. Keir Starmer is saying, no, it's not me, it's the medical experts that are saying this.
And if he really is going to press ahead with this, can he tell us what's the assessment, and has it been done, of the impact that it will have on infection rates and increased pressure on the NHS. What's the impact?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wish he'd have the guts just to say what he really wants to do, which is to cancel the plans people have made and cancel Christmas. I think that's what he's driving at, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, this is extremely difficult for me to follow because my blood pressure is increasing. Boris completely ignored the question here, completely ignored the point. Keir Starmer said the medical advice, not my advice, the medical advice is that you need stricter controls. Now, Boris Johnson is afraid to impose stricter controls. Now, if you look at the guidance and the rules, now the guidance and the rules are two different things. The guidance are, you should do this. The rules are, if you don't do this, you will be punished. The guidance is becoming stronger while the rules are becoming weaker. Now, why is that the case? If you want to control it, shouldn't it be the other way around? Or shouldn't both of them be strong? Boris Johnson is afraid to impose restrictions because he's afraid of his backbenchers. He's more afraid of his backbenchers than he is of the pandemic. He has an 80-seat majority and he's more afraid of his own party than the pandemic itself. I can't think of anything more absurd.
Speaker, he's looking a bit blank. I think that's what he's driving at. But I can tell him that as of today, and just this morning, there is actually, as I say, unanimous agreement across all the UK government, across all the devolved administrations, including members of all parties, Mr. Speaker, including his own.
Actually, this changed during the day. I think it was the Scottish government said, well, we'll follow, the guidance will remain the same, but we're going to have stricter rules. And Wales the same. Wales are talking about going into a lockdown. So it's not as Boris is saying.
We should proceed in principle with the existing regulations, Mr. Speaker, because we don't want to criminalise people's long-made plans, Mr. Speaker, but we do think it's absolutely vital that people should, at this very, very tricky time, exercise a high degree of personal responsibility, especially when they come into contact with elderly people, and avoid contact with elderly people wherever possible. And
so what he's doing here is he's trying to say to the public, please don't break the rules, but if you do break the rules, well, we're not going to punish you for it. But please don't break the rules. This isn't going to work. He's too afraid to piss off the public, because the public will piss off his backbenchers, and his backbenchers will likely undermine his position, and he may pay for it later on. So this is all about, not rocking the boat. He doesn't want to rock the boat too much with the voters, with the backbenchers. He has an 80-seat majority, and he's extremely weak.
that is how...
Sorry, just one final thing. He likes to pretend that he's like Churchill. And he couldn't be any further from the character of Churchill.
That is how, by being sensible and cautious, not by imposing endless lockdowns or cancelling Christmas as he would appear to want to do. That's the only implication I can draw from what he's said, Mr. Speaker, unless he wants to announce some other idea. That is the way we will continue to work together to keep this virus under control, to defeat it and take the country forward.
Keir Starmer.
Here we go again, Mr. Speaker, ignoring the medical advice. And we know where that leads, because we've seen what happened in the last 9 months. And whatever the Prime Minister says, there's no escaping the brutal facts that Britain has one of the highest number of COVID deaths in Europe and the worst economic damage. Mr. Speaker, as this is the last PMQ...
Okay, now this, please, if you're still watching this video, please remain for this part, because this was epic.
...of the year, I, for one, often wonder where the Prime Minister gets his advice from. Well, now I know, because I've here the official newsletter of the Wellingborough Conservative Party. It's not on everyone's Christmas reading list, but it is a fascinating read, because it gives a lot of advice to wannabe politicians. It says this: say the first thing that comes into your head. It'll probably be nonsense. You may get a bad headline, but if you make enough dubious claims fast enough, you can get away with it. And it includes the December edition, the advice. Sometimes it's better to give the wrong answer at the right time rather than the right answer at the wrong time. So my final question to the Prime Minister is this. Is he the inspiration for the newsletter or is he the author?
Fantastic. I was trying not to laugh because I didn't want to disturb him, but is Boris Johnson the author or the inspiration? This was a fantastic way to end Prime Minister's questions when it came to Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition. Now, Boris Johnson will try to respond, but at this stage, it's a bit like, you know, you have the comedian that comes on, the young, fresh guy who has new jokes. He's a funny guy. And then after everyone has had a good laugh, you have the old guy with the old script, you know, repeating the same old mantra. And you're like, okay, well, that's not very funny anymore. Well, let's just see the beginning of Boris Johnson's response to this. And, well, it's expected.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think what the people of this country would love to hear from the right honourable gentleman this season of goodwill is any kind of point of view at all on some of the.
It's too late, Boris. You know, he has stolen your thunder. He has won the hearts of the public at this stage, at least for today. I think. I don't know how long it will continue, but. That was an amazing. I'm not even going to bother with Boris Johnson because he just repeats the same old crap once again. You know, oh, he should be with us and blah, blah, blah. But this really was a moment for Keir Starmer. He really shone here. And I hope to see more of this. This seems to have been the last Prime Minister's questions for this year. So it's going to be very interesting next year what we're going to see. But kudos to Keir Starmer. I was a bit critical of him at the beginning of the year, where when he took over, I thought he was a bit stiff and he was a bit too lawyer-like. But in this Prime Minister's questions, he really took off the gloves and he gave Boris Johnson an absolute beating. So let me know in the comment section, guys, what you thought of this Prime Minister's questions. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?